Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and how the best writers risk being strange, and sometimes the best writers also risk being publishers. And I get a lot of questions about self-publishing. I've done some self-publishing experiments in my time, but I primarily don't do self-publishing. I primarily will publish with other publishers. So I wanted to haul somebody on here who's done some self-publishing and recently has, really dived into that world. And so we're going to talk to ZF Sigurdson. And if you go into the description for this episode, you'll find all sorts of links to get more information and some of these books that ZF Sigurdson is going to talk about. Zach, you have a new book coming out called The Wrong Side, and you also have a book called Bloodied already out. Both of them are part of the Veiled Sagas. In fact, The Wrong Side may be out by the time I get around to posting this interview. But regardless, it'll be out either already or soon at zfsigurdson.com, or if you're in the US, zfsigurdson.com. And can you tell us just a little bit about these two books and how you were sort of co-writing them in a manner of speaking? I'm curious to know more about the Veiled Sagas in a kind of broad sense before we get into some of the specifics of what these books are about and your process of publishing them, because I think there's a lot that people can learn from this sort of process that you're engaged in here.
Well, to start off with, like, what the Veiled Sagas are and what I write and kind of what I aim for is, I started with the idea of like all the hidden world fantasy books, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, like the stuff I grew up with. All of it's this hidden world fantasy. And I know me and plenty of other people of my generation who've lived with this stuff our entire lives are like, why aren't they using cell phones? Where is the influence of modern technology, modern society? People from our normal world get brought into the fantasy world, and they bring their ideas, their technology, their culture, and it's just a part of the world. But that allows me to do, and this is the point of the Veiled Sagas, a very genre-bent place to tell stories. I'm always a believer that like an interesting world isn't a story. An interesting world facilitates stories. So the Veiled Sagas is just a place where I can do like cool Western adventures, cool samurai duels, monster attacks, fantasy horror. Like I can do what I want because I'm so influenced and interested in just taking genre ideas and breaking them and mixing them up together. And so that's what the Veiled Sagas is to me. And the hard part is now making good writing out of it. So on one hand, I've really, really embraced kind of the pulp nonsense side of genre fiction, but I'm also working really hard with beta readers and with writing partners to try to make actual good stories. And this is why I built the world this way, so I can. It's a way as a young writer for me to get good at writing. And so when I decided to release these books, I had just left a job I was absolutely miserable out. I talk about this in Bloody, about my journey with depression, with anxiety, being an adult with autism, which I don't know if I mention in Bloody very much, but that is just a part of my life. And when I quit this job, I had just finished writing a big novel. I'd written about 2 novels. Both were like big, ugly, epic fantasy books. Also set in the Veiled Sagas because that's just where my mind goes, combining fantasy tropes with modern technology, kind of a medieval punk, Mad Max kind of thing going on all the time. And I sat down and like, oh God, I cannot commit to another novel. So at that time, I'd started to get into Conan Barbarian. I had always been a fan of H.P. Lovecraft. I had been listening to a lot of H.G. Wells and Edgar Rice Burroughs, a lot of classic genre fiction, a lot of the origins of genre fiction. So I said, screw it, I'm going to make pulp stories. And so for about 6 months, I hammered away at basically adventure serial stories following like a wandering warrior woman character, because I've seen enough Ronin style characters who are men. I wanted a woman character, but also her adventures are also very much me going discussing loneliness and depression and trauma, some things I've experienced. And in writing a bunch of these stories, eventually I got to the point where I need to start putting stuff out and start going through some sort of publishing process. And after a while, I had a bunch of stories. I had a couple other stories from other places, and I eventually just created a pulp style collection, and that became Bloodied. But throughout all this process, the other challenge I gave myself for that 6 to 8 months of just recovering, every week, I think it was every Monday, it might have been every Wednesday, it was once a week, I would slap a flash fiction onto my website. Doesn't matter what it was or how good it was, I was doing it every week. I was sharing it on my social media, going, here's the thing I put up online. And I would start to get feedback, and I would start to get responses from friends and family, and sometimes even strangers. And that was really, really pushing me into like getting towards getting published, or publishing myself, as the case ended up being. And so now, yeah, I'm taking all those flash fiction plus a couple extra that I had never seen the light of day, and putting them in an ebook for just so it's in a single, more convenient place.
And I'm curious about Bloodied and a little bit about, again, this kind of process of getting to publishing it. So where in this sort of timeline that you've laid out here a little bit, did you take that workshop where I met you and Lyndon Redchenka, we all, and some other people took a workshop with Jean B. Kamichik, Justin Curry, and Samantha Biko, or SM Biko as she publishes herself. Where in this does that workshop fall? Like, at what point were you kind of taking that, and were you at that point having, or I can't remember now if you had already decided to publish this book or not?
I had not at that point, but that meeting was a big moment, because like I was just finishing that novel. I was just starting to think about short stories and adventure fiction and pulp stories. And that meeting, that class was super important, because they simply looked at us and went, you don't have to do indie publishing and traditional publishing as mutually exclusive things. It can be a project by project thing. And then they also said, it's super helpful to get your own project made, to go through the process, to learn the process, to invest in your career this way. And that set off all the lights. So that eventually put me on the path that a year and a bit later, I would have Bloodied in my hands.
Yeah, I remember that workshop for a couple of reasons. So one reason is that I do a series of covert tests whenever I meet a writer. So the first test I do is I ask them if they can sell me their book right then and there. So you didn't have a book yet, so you couldn't do that. But Lyndon did, and he passed the test. He sold me his book. The reason I do that test is, one, I want to see, does this person have the willingness to sell a book to you? Like, do they have will they get behind their book? And two, do they have the infrastructure to sell a book to you? Which is not everybody, even if they want to sell you a book, has the infrastructure to do it. Because it's not always as simple as just handing you cash, because I want a receipt, I want all these things. And but then when you did finally put out. So Lyndon passed all my tests. I
Mm-hmm.
have other ones I do, but like
Mm-hmm.
you kind of, didn't have your book out yet. But then I
Mm-hmm.
heard from Lyndon actually that you were
Mm-hmm.
putting this book out, and I said, well, tell Zach if he emails me and tries to sell me a book, I'll buy one. And then you
Mm-hmm.
did, and I
Yeah.
bought it. And then when it came, I do a series. So I knew that at this point that you had self-published the book
Mm-hmm.
uh, through, I guess, Ingram Spark it would be. So when the book came, I do now for self-published books, I have another series of covert, tests I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so usually, so it's like a list of, things that I look for in the book immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, more than most of the self-published books that I see, like, runs down the checklist quite well. For example, you've got a matte cover,
Mm-hmm.
which, I don't see a lot. I see a lot of people choosing a poor, you've got somebody else designing the cover. Our
Yes.
friend Stephen Call did a really great
Mm-hmm.
image here. And then you had, I guess it was Chloe Brown do the design.
Yeah.
Uh,
Chloe's an old friend of mine who's a
you've
graphic designer.
you've got this your paper stock and the color is really nice. A lot of people pick the wrong paper stock and color.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have a lot of paper stock auctions in this particular
It was
place,
with
but
Amazon, so they have like
sure.
a relatively limited,
But
but
the color is something a lot of people do wrong. And there's a bunch of other sort of things in here, but I was very impressed by the actual production quality of this
Mm-hmm.
book, which is not something so it just bespeaks to me of actually having done a fair amount of research.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about when you just made the decision to publish this book yourself? What were sort of the next things you did sort of on the path to doing that, and what were some of the things you sort of realized you had to do, and then how did you kind of go about solving the kind of problems that all of a sudden you have in front of you because you decided to do this project?
Research, a lot of there's a lot of YouTube videos, and I was just combing through advice from different indie authors, going through the process. Like a big day was just me logging onto Amazon, building the profile, and then slowly going, oh, this is how they do this. This is how they do this. This is how they do this. I want to get like the editing done by this date, the cover done by this date, get it designed by this date. And so it was just very much of me feeling out the process. One of the craziest parts about publishing a book is just the waiting, just waiting on the art, waiting on the graphic design, even just waiting for Amazon to be able to send me the book. Because a big problem with the release of Bloodied was it was in the first big wave of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there was the solid month, the first month of quarantine when I was laid off, my whole family was laid off, of me just waiting to see if I would even be able to publish the book.
Well, a lot of people don't in that scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in what separates the people who do the thing versus don't do the thing. It's like, writing a book is a massive project. It's a massive undertaking, even just to finish a draft, which most people don't do. Never mind now you take on the job of finalizing the draft and so on, and then publishing the actual book. One thing I'm really curious about is, when adversity hits, or even when it doesn't hit, but just because there's so many things in front of you. I'm curious to know what kind of keeps you kind of going, or what kind of kept you going through all this to kind of get the book out when, not just the normal challenges of writing and publishing are coming into play, but additionally, we have, personal challenges, pandemic challenges, this whole other set of, kind of problems that on one hand, the internet and the self-publishing process makes, in some ways, they are less affected or less able to affect that process, but in other respects, it's it's still this massive thing that's happening, and is certainly throwing a wrench into things. It would have been very easy in that scenario to just say, "I'll do it when the pandemic is over."
Yeah.
And just kind of give yourself the out. So what kind of kept you going when you had a perfectly good out?
For me, that wasn't really an option. luckily the book was finished by the time the pandemic hit. And I had been talking about it with coworkers because like I work in a kitchen, and like a kitchen's a great place for outcasts. There's lots of like people in all their stages of life there. So I'm coming in every other day going, oh, I made some more progress on my book. Or, oh, check out to my sous chef or my head chef. Oh, I got the cover done. Check this out. So wimping out and saying, oh no, the book's not coming because pandemic, that wasn't an option for a social aspect, but for me, I needed this thing finished. I needed it. I couldn't wait. I wanted it out there. I wanted to do this thing. I wanted to hold it in my hands. It wasn't an option to delay, even as the world was burning. And I want to preface everything that I've been talking about with me basically taking sabbatical, me self-publishing, because I'm very fortunate. I still live with my family. We share everything. I have money I was able to save up for self-publishing, which is a huge benefit. Just being able to not quite enjoy quarantine, but be able to use the time quarantine has given me to do the thing I really, really love. I have an obligation to do the thing. I can't be screwing about. It's important to take breaks, but especially with the first quarantine, I had no excuse not to publish this book. My life had not been affected that much. So it was important that I finish this project.
You were saying after having written a novel, you just wanted some smaller project, and so you did a large project in the sense as the book, but you decided you work on short stories. You also were doing these flash fictions. I think that's a very interesting decision that a lot of people also don't make, which is, they'll get mired in the morass of the novel, which is a very difficult thing to write. And it's not that short fiction is not difficult. It's in some ways more difficult to write short fiction, but it certainly is a more bounded genre. Like by its very nature, the novel can go forever. In fact, one of the theories of the novel by Bakhtin is that the novel can contain inside of it any other thing that you could find in the literary world, and therefore, and its sort of boundlessness is its sort of actual structural capacity. So I'm really, I'm curious, how you hit on this short fiction idea versus coming off the novel, but also just with the publishing side of it. What kind of went into the decision to self-publish versus seek a more traditional publisher? Now, you mentioned the workshop and sort of how that influenced you in that you kind of felt it wasn't an either-or decision. But I'm curious to know, so I guess what I'm sort of boiling down here in terms of a question is, what did you find was the most attractive aspect of going down the self-publishing route, and what do you think is the most kind of valuable lesson you've kind of taken from it?
I think of like a big valuable thing of self-publishing is it teaches you the entire process yourself. Like I had to go find the editor, I had to go find the graphic artist, I had to go find the cover artist. So being able to do all that myself was huge. I'm still not terribly good at it, but me learning social media a little bit better for doing advertising and marketing and managing my own website, doing all the steps yourself, really, just doing it is the educator, and investing in it is its own education. And with doing Bloodied, this is very much me putting something out there and doing something weird and seeing how people respond to it and seeing if it works. And also for me, being able to finish a project and have it out there. And now I'm going to do a couple more of them because I have enough short stories left over.
And now you've got the bug.
Oh yeah, it's yeah, writing is, I'm not stopping, and I'm not going to stop is if I don't have to.
What do you think is there anything you think you'll do differently next time as a result of, something you kind of learned on this with this book?
Well, stuff I've already been doing, because while the wrong side is coming, I am still planning on having the direct sequel to Bloodied coming out in May. So I have a much heavier beta reading process. Instead of just a couple critiques here and there, I am hunting for beta readers and I am hounding them for critiques. I am looking for not only a copy editor, but a substantive editor to help polish these stories off. So my worst aspects don't come through as much. Just a minor thing that's been like in a lot of ways a huge relief is I spent a lot of Bloody's publication just waiting for stuff. Like the book was finished, the book was edited for a long time before it came out. And so now I have a little bit more breathing room because I now know how long these things take. And so I'm able to, like this time last year, Bloodied was pretty much edited or in the hands of an editor. Now I have a little bit more time, and I can work on other stuff, and I can polish up other stuff, and it's more breathing room now that I know how long the process takes.
Is there a particular thing you would recommend people focus on first if they were going to dive into the self-publishing world, just given your recent experience?
I would really, really encourage people to get better at networking than I am, because it is really hard to market something that just exists on the internet that even the most aimless Amazon hunters may not even find it. It is so important to have a network of other writers and readers to help other parts of the world realize that this thing exists, and maybe the right readers out there who will really enjoy it and really get that individual kind of passion and creative imagination that's there that they won't find anywhere else.
It really is quite a set of things you're doing when you take on the publishing role, and of course also the marketing role. I mean, usually, even if you're publishing with a traditional publisher, I would say that writers really have to market themselves. Like there's a little bit that a publisher will do for you, but they just simply can't do that much for you. Or nor should they in many respects. It just isn't usually a wise investment unless the book is already kind of moving in a certain direction. And then they can get behind that and they can recognize that maybe in a way you can't. They can maybe do things that you can't, maybe you wouldn't think to do, and they have more experience in this and that and the other thing. But for the most part, in modern publishing, at least, even with a traditional publisher, writers really have to take on the onus of marketing their work themselves. And so to slot the publisher role into it as well is, it is quite a lot of things that that are sort of stacking on the writer position. And I think that I'm very, I typically myself work with traditional publishers, although I've done a few self-publishing projects, and I'll do more publishing projects myself before long. But the thing I often will say when people kind of come to me and ask me questions about self-publishing is I'll ask them, do you want to be a writer or a publisher? You can, of course, be both, but what I often will see with people is that they actually don't want to be a publisher at all. They really just want to be a writer, but they have the idea that somehow being a publisher is, going to help them as a writer. It really, in many ways, I think, just gets in your way. But it is its own thing that I think has a lot of attraction, and there is a level at which I think the integration of being able to kind of write and publish and market, if you can kind of hook yourself into those things in an interesting way, I think there's so many interesting opportunities there if a person is really willing to take those roles on fully. So I'm curious to know, like, what you found you actually enjoyed
about the publishing process to the degree that you want to keep doing it, that maybe you weren't expecting to enjoy?
I'm not sure if it's enjoyment. I just knew that if I do these things, I get a book at the end, because writing and telling stories, that's where my heart is. And I have to force myself to do the administrative work. But I know if I do it, then I get a book at the end. And it is a very emotional moment for me. And for all writers, it is a really emotional moment holding that book for the first time. And just the things that I've imagined and I've written and I've created are now, they're not just mine anymore. I get to share it and show it and go, ooh, here's this cool thing I made. I think bringing different talent is a big thing I enjoyed. Bringing, talking to different artists, talking to graphic designers, talking to different editors and other writers. That's probably the big part of the publishing process that I enjoy the most. And getting those first roughs of a cover art, getting that email going, here's your cover art, what do you think? There's nothing that really beats that for me. Just that sheer, it's the sheer excitement I try to write with that I then get passed back to me.
The cover art's really something. It is one of the things that with traditional publishing you don't typically get much input or impact on. I mean, some people more than others. I tend to get a bit more influence than another person might, but even so, it's out of my hands, right? And it is an interesting thing. How did you go about vetting or finding, like, did you know Stephen already, or how did you go about finding
Stephen
this
was
art
through
for the cover?
Stephen was through Lyndon.
Sure.
Because ever since that workshop, me and Lyndon have basically been in daily contact talking about writing and movies and books and politics. We're just, and now we have a couple more people in our little writing goblins group chat, though it's the group chat of beats. So it was the group chat of guilt for a while. And yeah, it was, I always knew I wanted, I always want local writers to do my covers. So I had approached Nico Rudolph because he does very pulpy stuff. But he was busy at the time, so I went off to check other stuff. With Stephen, I knew what I wanted. The question was, and it was completely fair to him, that his style may not work for what I wanted. And he was completely upfront with that, and I completely understood. But he absolutely knocked it out of the park. I said I wanted a Frank Frazetta style cover with like that climactic orgy of violence that you would get in a Conan story. And he took it to the next level, and it is awesome. With The Wrong Side that's coming out, I had a coworker at the restaurant and who's a graphic artist, and me and him were always talking about, we should do a comic together, we should do a book cover, we should do something. So I messaged him, whatever your rate is, do the cover for this. It's a flash fiction collection. Pick any story from this and go with it. So he picked one of a story I did not expect him to pick. It is not a very visually interesting story, but he made it visually interesting. And the craziest part is it features a character it features one of the first characters I ever created. And so it was a very emotional moment when he sent me that art. The artist is named Paul Longchamp, and he has stuff on Instagram and Twitter. He's a gorgeous artist. And so it was a hugely emotional moment when he sent me the art of this character that had been with me for so long, and now I could finally see this character in all the glorious madness. But with what's coming next with the sequel for Bloodied, I have a very looser idea, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens with that.
Well, I'm very happy to be talking to you, and I'm glad to hear more about the Veiled Sagas. And if people, again, want to learn more about the Veiled Sagas, check out Bloodied, or The Wrong Side, or future works by Zach, then go to zfsigurdson.com. Or where else can they find you online, Zach?
I'm on all social media as ZF Sigurdson, ZF Sigurdson 95. My website's a great place because it kind of leads to everywhere else, but I'm probably most active on Instagram because I'm always sharing the books I'm reading, the meals I'm cooking, publication stuff.
Well, thanks again for talking to me, and
thank you.
Keep writing the wrong way.
I absolutely will.